Last year, 293 reporters were arrested and jailed, most of those in China. 46 other journalists were murdered last year. So you could do about one a day. One journalist a day was either murdered or arrested. And that happens because they want to publish, let people know the truth of what governments are doing mostly. And so they are imprisoned and die for that. John the Baptist wasn't a journalist, but he was doing in his day what journalists do a lot of these days, and that's pointing out what people of power are doing. And the people in power don't like it. And John the Baptist was pointing out what King Herod was up to and saying, what you're doing is wrong. And so Herod had him arrested. So he's sitting in prison. He had been calling for repentance, you might recall from last week. And his view of the Messiah's coming was he would have his winnowing fan in his hand. He would separate the wheat from the chaff. He would burn up that which was bad. We had to get ready for the Messiah's coming because the Messiah was one who would bring judgment. That's what he was proclaiming. And then he baptized Jesus, and he saw the heavens opened, and he heard that Jesus was the Messiah, and so he was really excited and looking forward. This is it, this is it. The Messiah is going to get rid of all evil in the world. And then he hears in prison what Jesus is up to. People coming, telling him stories. And so then he has to send these guys with the question, did I screw up? Are you the Messiah? Or maybe are we supposed to wait for somebody else? Was I doing this for, maybe you weren't. I thought I saw that dove. I'm sure I heard a voice. But where's the fire? You know what I hear? I think you're hanging out with tax collectors, prostitutes. You're hanging out with poor people. Come on. This wasn't what I expected. So Jesus' response is quite interesting to those disciples of John who come and ask the question. Because he didn't just say, yep, I am. Just go back and tell him, yep, I'm the Messiah. That would have, just cleared it all up. But no, he says, well, go back and tell John what you've been telling him. What you see and hear. And what do you see and hear? The deaf hear, the blind see, the lame walk, the dead are raised, and the poor have the good news preached to them. So they went back, but we don't know if that helped John or not. Okay. But it does fulfill what Isaiah said would happen when the Messiah came. People would be healed. New life would come about. And those who are struggling will hear good news. Jesus goes on to talk about John once his disciples left, turning to the crowds and saying, so what about you? why did you go out to see John? And then Jesus says, he is the greatest of the Old Testament prophets. No one is greater than he, greater than Elijah, Elisha, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah. He is the greatest of all those Old Testament prophets. But then he says this interesting thing. But the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. Think, what does that mean? The least in the kingdom of heaven. So this is Matthew's gospel. In Matthew's community, that's how the disciples referred to themselves. They were the least. They didn't want to tout anything that they were great or wonderful simply because they were following Jesus. They understood what Jesus taught. And so that's how they defined themselves. Who are you? I'm the least. One of the least ones. So when you hear it that way, then Jesus is saying, but any follower of mine is greater than John the Baptist. I don't know if you see yourself that way, but that's what Jesus said. You who've been baptized, you who follow him, are greater than John the Baptist. Because Jesus brings something different. And those who follow him are invited into that kingdom. John's the end of the Old Testament. He is the last of the Old Testament prophets. He brings that period to an end. And now there's this new kingdom that Jesus brings, that you and I are a part of, where you and I can have intimacy with the divine on a daily basis. John never got Eucharist, but you will tonight. You will have Jesus Christ inside of you, his flesh and blood. But then you and I, my friends, are supposed to do what Jesus does. We who are his body, we who become Jesus today. So when John's disciples come up to you and say, hey, are you a follower of Jesus? You could just say, yep. Or you could do like Jesus did. Tell people what you see and hear. What do they see in you? How are other people's lives transformed because of the light you bring? Are people who are deaf to God because of you able to hear the presence, hear his word? Are people who are blind to God able to see because of the light you bring to them? Are those who struggle to walk toward God able to leap and dance because of you? Are those who are dead in the spirit brought to new life because you follow Jesus? Do the poor have their lives transformed because of the good news you bring? It should be able to see in us the presence of the divine. We should be able to give that same answer that Jesus gave, so that this world knows that Jesus came, as you and I know that he came, and that even the least, you and I, can be great because Jesus is with us. Nothing that we've done. It's what he does in us.